Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Bryan O'Rourke. This is episode 160. It's April 2024, and I just got back from the big European Health and Fitness Forum, and I want to tell you that was a great event. I highly recommend the Deloitte Europe Active report. It is super comprehensive. I also recommend you visit Europe Active and Black Box Publishers for the book on strategic management that I just published with folks from Europe, my colleagues. It was great seeing everyone there. What a wonderful event that was. And of course, the FIBO show. We had a great time seeing people from all over the world and reconnecting with folks. It's great to be back out there. Well, on today's podcast, episode 160, I guess that's some kind of a monumentous feat. We are having Federico Imparatta from Uruguay on the pod and had a great interview with him about some of the realities of developing fitness products digitally. And it's very good insights from him. Federico is, if you follow him on LinkedIn, I highly recommend you do. Look for the links to his company in the show notes, Ataraxy. Or Ataraxy, I should say. Federico is a somewhat philosopher, a very interesting guy, has some very interesting and pragmatic experiences about digital products and how to think about developing products. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you will too. So without further ado, let's welcome Federico. Well, listeners, as I said in the intro, we have a guy in Federico's joining us from Uruguay who I think is probably one of the top digital product developers in the fitness space. Federico, thanks for joining us today. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you for having me. And sorry about my voice. I'm going through a bit of a cold, but I think I still sound good. So we can continue.
You sound great. I appreciate you being here. You know, we had a few conversations in advance of the podcast, and you and I have spoken before about a number of things. I always find your insights pretty interesting. And so let's jump right into a question. Sure. Developing digital products, especially in the fitness space, which you've done a lot of. Can we talk about the challenges, the things that people go through in the real world? What are the things that you have faced over and over again that people should be aware of when you talk about developing a digital fitness product?
I think developing a product in itself, be it digital or not, in itself has a lot of even philosophical challenges that you need to accept in order to actually be ready to build it. The first one is my idea good enough to be built? Because there are many sayings about how ideas are like, everyone has ideas, but then if only you execute, like you win if you execute, basically. Yep. But the main challenge is my idea worth building? In the fitness space in particular, and we work with a lot of companies in that space, it's like the main weakness of the founders is also their main strength. These are very motivated individuals that have achieved some sort of excellence maybe in the fitness space. So they're like, if I can run a 5-minute mile, I can build anything, which could be true. But the reality is most of the times an idea isn't good enough by itself to be built. You have to challenge it and go through a discovery process. And even the word discovery, right? You have to, like, it means like finding what's not seen, or like you need to see a problem. Like I'm sure when they built AirPods, they ran into a million problems. Like what happens if you rub fabric against it? Like, have you ever used them in bed? Like you hear that background noise? Like those are all things that were thought of in some capacity. And that's the main challenge, like, is what I'm building like the right thing? And that's what we do right now at Ataraxy, the team. Like that's the only thing they're doing right now, which is taking ideas from our clients, from our partners, and challenging them and running that through a process to actually build something that's usable. Right, that's the the main challenge, not just in fitness and everything, but in fitness in particular.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a challenge. And how do you, because that takes, as you pointed out, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, or you think you know what you don't know. And sometimes the old saying is a little success is a terrible thing, right? So how do people navigate that? How do they effectively deal with your trying to create something that you don't necessarily understand?
I think you understand it by building it. You might have an idea or a North Star or something that guides you forward in a product or any project. And by doing a process of discovery, and this isn't like it's a written in stone process, it's actually approaching a problem and analyzing it and going back to the drawing board, et cetera. And while you're doing that, you are actually learning about the product and how it's using it. And navigating that process is, I hate the word process. We can go about that later, but because it sounds like it's a recipe and it isn't. But navigating through that is actually what helps you understand the product you're ultimately building and how people are going to react to it. And that's I think that's key right there. It's like the journey towards an MVP or the journey towards whatever deliverable or whatever acronym you choose to call it when it's done. That's actually what your product is about. And if you get to the point where you can say, all right, yeah, this is what we built and we went through these many iterations and this is what happens, you're actually adding a lot more to the table and just like, oh, here are 17 developers that you can put to your mobile app that does exactly the same thing that everyone does. And look, it's got notifications. Look how nice it is. Here's a $300,000 check. Like there's no value at it.
Yep. Yep.
But
no, I understand. We were saying in the beginning, and when we were chatting about this, and I've said this too, the fitness industry is a wonderful place because you have a lot of very motivated people. I've said a lot of endorphins are going on in the fitness space, which is great, but there's another side to that coin where
yes.
where the enthusiasm can sometimes become a liability as well, because people are so enthusiastic about the space and they run headlong into attempting to solve problems that test those assumptions. So have you experienced that when it comes to developing a digital product in the space?
I have, and I don't want to name names, which I won't, but we've actually laughed about this with the person that he's going to listen to it. He's going to say, oh, Federico. But we were working on a project, we were Connected Fitness. Like everyone was working on Connected Fitness a couple of years ago because it was getting a lot of money and the product was out there and people were using it. So we thought. And the reality was that not many people were using it. A lot of people were buying it. And there were possible, like thousands of explanations were possible as to why people weren't really using it. The first one being, I think every time I bought like an at-home fitness device that was connected or not, like me personally, like I use it as a coat hanger in the long run. Like you buy it, use it, and staying motivated is an issue for consumers. The issue that we had ran into is everyone involved in the crafting of the product. Like we were more in the instrumentation part, but everyone involved in the product idea, they were like fitness fanatics. So they were building a bike that was for people that were in love with fitness. I remember talking to the product manager in that regard. His name is Andres. He might listen to this, so he'll remember. I remember talking to the product manager. We were talking like they need to get people like us on it. Not necessarily like if you run 26 kilometers every day, like of course you're gonna use it. Like get me on it. Like get my mom on that bike, and you'll make millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
Ultimately, the project was successful. Like the product was successful. I'm not saying it was a failure, but the staying power, like Peloton.
Yes.
Like everything that Peloton is going into, and I'm not talking about Peloton. I've never worked with Peloton. Like I'm just saying it as an example, which is like Peloton ran into a lot of issues with coming out of the pandemic because we were all buying Pelotons because we were all home bored.
All right.
Right. I think maybe you guys at Core had similar issues, but in another capacity, which is like a lot of people bought bikes and they don't use them. So they have the bike, which you lost money on because you were trying to sell it. So you like, and now Peloton is shifting into like a media company.
Yeah.
So the product managers of Peloton or the people building product at Peloton, do they have to think more like core or do they have to think more like Disney Plus?
Right.
And I think they probably have to think a lot more like Netflix and Disney Plus than core.
Yeah.
And is that a shift? Have they failed I don't think so, but if you're not having the conversation about, all right, we're pushing media now, we're not pushing fitness. If you're not having that conversation, ultimately it'll fail.
That's right.
It's all about having that right conversation, because you might be trying to sell one thing, but then the numbers, like if you go into your database and you see how many people log in, the numbers are saying something else. It's your job to get ahead of it. Otherwise, and reality is always the harshest judge.
Yes.
It'll hit you. It's like you can fake everything except reality.
Yeah, reality doesn't care.
Yeah, it doesn't care about your opinions. If it's about opinions, then the world will be ran by the people that were, that speak the loudest, and it doesn't. It's just like reality happens, and then there's no crying about it.
That's right.
We've thankfully built the tools necessary to get ahead of it, but it's like you need to interpret it. It's all about context. But if you don't run through that, it's like constant discovery. If you don't run through that exercise, at some point you'll become irrelevant. And it applies to everything, like from your career, your relationships. Like you have to work on stuff.
That's right. That's right.
I have to work on, like you have to work on your relationships with your friends, your wife, your husband, like everyone. You have to work on it. And it's the same thing with product.
Yep. Tell me about this with the idea of moonshots and the idea of product development, digital product, because I've always been a believer in having smaller companies that are very tightly focused, that don't require huge overheads. Those aren't bad companies. Like everyone doesn't have to build $1 billion idea, but I've tended to see in the last number of years with the entrepreneurial environment we have, where people are almost thought of as being irrelevant if they build a 10 million or 20 million or $100 million company versus a $1 billion company. How much have you found that kind of thinking to impact the development approach that certain groups might have, or do you not see that?
Yeah, but it's, for lack of a better word, and it might be English being my second language, but it's tragedy.
Yeah.
I've seen people say that $1 million isn't that much money.
I know.
$1 million is a lot of money.
Yes.
I don't know for you, Brian, but for me, it's a lot of money.
Yes.
And like, if you built something that makes $1 million, you should be proud of it.
Yes.
Now, like you don't need to be Bill Gates, and probably Bill Gates will tell you the same thing. So I got lucky. And look at Elon Musk. He made a lot of money and he spent it. He bought Twitter. Like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But like, it doesn't, like, if you build something that people use and you make money from it, that's the greatest thing. Like, I don't remember his name, but the guys from 37 Signals, the ones that built Basecamp,
yep,
he was on LinkedIn the other day and I was scrolling and he said, like, a business doesn't need a mission and vision statement. Like, it just needs to make more money than it spends. And if you do that, you're great.
Yep.
And I think that sometimes the entrepreneurial, and it happens a lot in fitness, like you go to all those conferences, like you were just at Bebo. Like, it doesn't happen because you're like an industry veteran, you're the OG, you've seen everything. But these guys are starting and they go to FIBO and they run into you and oh, I need to build. It's like, you are already making money. Like, even if you're like not $1 million, like if you're making $100,000, that's amazing. And like, you're cool. Like, stop. You don't need to buy a private plane to feel cool. Like,
that's right.
Like, you're making money. We built Ataraxy. We started in March of last year. And we did not do anything by the book. I think our first logo was like AI generated.
Yeah.
And mission and vision was ChatGPT.
Yep.
We just got clients and we built stuff. And then in November, we sold 50% to the White Pearl Technology Group. And the first thing you said, like what you said right now about small companies without overhead, like the guys sitting at the table above the guys that are on the table, like the shareholders, everything they tell you, like that's exactly what we need. You need small businesses that actually make money, because the big businesses that don't make money are empty.
That's right.
Empty of anything. And then like you can sit about like the entrepreneurial process. It's all that's why I hate the word process, because there's no recipe.
Yes.
Like if process was a recipe, we'd all be billionaires by now.
That's right. That's right. Well, although I think you're right. I mean, and I share that philosophy, which is one of, because you go to FIBO, and I love FIBO, but you see a lot of products that are very new with these giant booths that these people have spent huge sums of money. And in the back of my mind, I go, do you really need to be doing that right now? I mean, but anyway, like you said, it's not a recipe. People do it in different ways, but I'm like you. Stay lean.
There's a process. Yeah, I think you need to stay lean, and then there's also like a time and a place. Like my grandma used to tell me, like, have breakfast first.
Yes.
Like, finish your breakfast. Like, just don't get ahead of yourself. Like, don't go into debt to fund a booth at FIBO.
Yes.
Like, get it if you really want to get into debt, because debt is horrible. But if you really want to get into debt, invest it in your business. Like, I don't know, hire developers, hire better lawyers. I don't know. It's anything.
Anything.
Right. It's like, have breakfast first. And then I was speaking with my sales team the week before FIBO, because I was saying, hey, man, maybe you guys should go. I don't go to a conference. I have a small baby. I like to stay home and play with her. That's my thing. But like, our sales team goes in, and I'm like, you should go hang out with with all my friends from the industry. And then they say, you don't have many friends. I'm like, yeah, don't make fun of me. But then one guy in the sales team that never speaks, he's like, well, we should actually be looking somewhere else. I was like, what do you mean? He said, no, everyone that's going to those things isn't looking to get something built. They've already built it. They're showing it to you. You need to find the people that are actually building it. And I think that was the most brilliant thing I've heard.
That is very insightful. That's a great example.
It's already built. They already spent the money to build it. They spent the money on the booth, and they spent you need to go somewhere else. There's like that. There's a proto conference or a pre-conference somewhere that those guys are going to. And I found that very aligned with the product development process. It's like, you need to be aware of where you are in the process to actually have, because if you imagine you spend like in marketing and doing maybe things, and you spend thousands of dollars, and you land at, we're saying FIBO because it was last week, but it could be anything. It could be anything.
Yeah.
And you land at a conference, and you spend all this money prepping and like tickets, because people live far away. So it's like, I don't know, airfare is crazy right now.
Yeah.
And you go there and you don't get anything. Like, you might get a meeting, but like, it's your ROI. Like, are you looking at it? Because that's like, it goes into, everybody says they make decisions by looking at numbers, but do you really? Because like, to me, I wouldn't, like, it doesn't explain how things are done. And like, is it really worth it? Maybe you could have used it. And it's not about not going there. It's like, have breakfast first. Like my grandma used to tell me, like, dude, just do you. And at some point, you'll get to hang out at FIBO with Bryan. Because Bryan's like, you've already done it, right? Because you build core and everything. But like, you don't have to be Mark Zuckerberg. You don't have to be like, there's like 3 of those guys.
Yeah.
I have a friend, he plays professional football, well, who's soccer. You guys call it soccer. He plays in like Turkey. Like, big. He plays for the national team. He played at the World Cup. And he used to play with us when we were small in the neighborhood. And he always tells the kids, he's like, there's only one of me. But it's not because I'm special. Like, I got lucky. You should go to school. Like, and again, it goes back to my grandma saying, have breakfast first.
Yep.
Like, you don't need to be Messi. Like, Messi, the soccer player, not Messi as Messi. Like, you can go to school. Like, you can be an accountant. That's cool too.
Yes.
And it applies to everything. I see life like that now. I used to be more like, I maybe 5 years ago, I say, no, let's go to FIBO and build a booth. And now I'm like, nah, man.
Yeah.
Let's build businesses that make money.
That's right. I think that's wisdom. And so you spoke a little bit about making decisions emotionally, and human beings believing they do things based on good reasons, when a lot of times it's emotional. Let's talk about data-driven decision making, because this is something that you hear a lot of. But in my experience, there's a lot of nuance to that, because there's all kinds of data. I was telling you before we started, there's liars, damn liars, and statisticians. So how do you know what data is real? I mean, with Bezos, he talks about first day thinking. He talks about the idea of not being burdened by the past. It's kind of your attitude of thinking. And when it comes to data, tell us some of your experiences with data-driven decision-making and why that can be challenging.
have you seen, there's a meme, I think it's a meme. There's like an airplane, like a diagram of an airplane, and it shows you where the bullet holes were, like in World War II. And they were looking at, I don't think it's a meme. I think it's a textbook. But, I haven't been in school for so long. I think I get my memes and my textbooks confused. But basically, the problem was they were shooting down airplanes in World War II. So all the planes that would land, they would have bullet holes in certain areas. And the engineers looked at it and say, all right, we need to reinforce those areas so they don't have bullet holes. So they reinforced them and they kept getting shot down. And the problem was that the planes that were returning were the ones that did not get shot where it mattered. So the ones that weren't returning were getting shot. And that talks about data-driven decision. But the one that, because everyone says, no, I'm data-driven. Great. I know a guy that says he's data-driven. He learned how to write with ChatGPT. Like, I know him. Like, you're not data-driven, bro. But the problem is you can be data, like you can have all the data in the world, but if you don't understand the context of that data and how that data works, you're not doing anything. So in that World War II example, it's like maybe the guy looking at the airplane with the holes, he understood a lot about airplanes, but he didn't understand how like things work. So if the plane's coming back, it means that it worked. If it isn't, that's your problem. You need to reinforce the other area. And it's the same thing for business. We had a client and they were using, like they had the product out in the field and they were selling a lot. It was the pandemic. Everyone was selling. They were selling tons. And we said, oh man, look at all, wow. But if you looked at the usage data, there were like 100, 200 people using the product. And it's like, that's your data. You have the context and you understand the industry. You understand the industry, but you're so driven. And it was the project I talked about, like, you're so driven, you're so fitness driven, you think everyone is like you, but everyone isn't like you. That applies to everyone. It's like, you're not special at all. Like, no one is. Like, we're all important and we're all unique and we're all like to be cherished and loved, but we're not special.
Right.
And like, you're not special. So do not think that you're building products for special people. You're building products for real people, probably that look a lot more like me than like anyone that runs a marathon, right? It's like people were buying something and they weren't using it.
Yep.
And at some point, like, it slows down the business, and it's all about data. So collecting the right data. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Like, you can look at Google Analytics and figure out a lot. So when you're looking at, like, when you're doing product discovery, when you're doing something, you don't need to have like a data warehouse or a data lake.
Right.
Just look at what you have and then make certain assumptions, assume things, and you have to be able to reiterate. Like, no one's going to look at something and say, this is what's happening. It's like Moses coming down from Mount. These are the 10 commandments. Because it doesn't work that way. And that's for the fourth time, I think. That's why I hate process. Because people think that having a process means that you have all those truths revealed and you can apply it to everything. And it doesn't work.
It doesn't work that way. Why do you think, is in the projects you worked on and in your past? I mean, I have some thoughts about this, but I want to hear what you have to say. What is the secret sauce to keeping an organization or a team sober, to being open-minded around and understanding how to build that context when looking at data? What is the secret to that?
I think you need to have a team that understands that their main reason for being a team is to solve a problem. Because once you have a team that actually achieves it, like, you can have friends. I have great friends that I love, but I've never worked with them. And I have great people who I work with that I appreciate and I speak to every day and I admire that I'd never be friends with. And that line, a lot of people don't have it clear. So why am I coming to this? Because a lot of people confuse things.
Yeah.
And in order to have a fruitful work environment, you need to be able to challenge each other's ideas, which doesn't mean challenge each other in any other way, but you need to challenge ideas. And when people don't have that distinction clear, they make the mistake of assuming that you challenging an idea means that you don't like them. And we're trying to build a digital product, not play high school music. So we need to like avoid that. Because if I come to you and say, hey, Bryan, you know what? I think, your latest core product is missing this, and it doesn't mean, hey, Bryan, I don't like you.
That's right.
And, like, we're having an exchange. And I make a particular point in that because I think there's a lot of that happening in every industry. So the secondary conversations that stem from a reaction. When you react to something, that's on you. Like if you tell me something and I don't like it and it makes me feel bad, unless you were like explicitly mean,
Yeah.
But even then, like how I react to it is on me. It sounds like wacky psychological, but it's true. So if people aren't mature enough to understand that in the context of having a conversation regarding a product or a feature of anything,
Right.
then you're never going to be able to build it, because you always end up having a secondary conversation that you even like. It's not explicit, it's implicit, but you're having a conversation about if if I like you or if I'm into you, or and that costs a lot of money, because I've seen projects spend $300,000-$400,000 in that conversation and not have a single deliverable. And it's like, oh no, you didn't tell me the requirements. Now we were arguing about if we liked each other. Like you can't work that. So what I try to do with my teams and with our clients, and in fact, we've like turned down clients because of this. Like you're not ready to have this conversation, and it's fine. Like I'm not Sophocles. Like I'm not here to tell you how to think. Like you're not ready for it, and I'm not ready to have this conversation with you, because I've tried to force projects with people that aren't ready to work in the way that we like to work.
Yep.
And I'll probably die a very poor man because of this, but it distracts me and the team so much from what we actually want to do, to have to convince you every single meeting,
right,
that working with us is actually worth it. That's like, I'd much rather not have the money. Like, keep the money.
Yes.
You need it for something else. And that, we actually got one of our biggest clients. It started that way. Like we turned them down. And then the CEO called me like 2 weeks after. He said, I've been thinking, and you turning us down, we understood a lot of things. I was like, all right, let's talk. And we built a relationship, which is a lot better than a transactional piece.
Yep.
But I think I rambled on. But
no, I understand.
What you need from a team is, in order to build a successful team, and teams, it's not just internal, like everything.
Yes.
You need to be able to challenge each other's ideas without generating a secondary dialogue or conversation around how you felt about something. Because how you feel about something in a professional context of respect and in a multicultural environment, how you feel about something, that's your problem. And I'm not saying it in a despective way. It's literally your problem. Like, you choose how to take something. And even if something like offends you, you choose how to react. Like, you can have a conversation about it or distract from it. But if you're spending time on that, you're not spending time on building product.
Right. That's so true. And it's so interesting, because when you talk about building digital things, the people building them are human beings. And the biggest thing that influences that is the philosophy and culture of the teams and how they work together. And that's not necessarily digital at all. When you it's a philosophy.
It's like literally, our company's called Ataraxy. Ataraxy is a philosophical concept. Yep. I think it's Greek. It's probably Greek because all those guys invented that, right?
Yeah.
So they're all Greek. The Romans just took it. Yeah. But Ataraxy means and someone's going to call me, like, well, you'll post this on LinkedIn and someone's going to say, Ataraxy is actually a concept from Macedon. But I don't know. Macedon is Greek, but Ataraxy means like the lack of turbulence. Like if you reach Ataraxy, like these Stoics, in Spanish I can say a lot better. They were saying like the ultimate goal is to reach that level where you're not bothered by anything, so you can focus on reality itself.
Yes.
And it sounds kooky if you talk about it at dinner with like in a first date, but if you're trying to build something, it's actually very powerful, because if you achieve, you'll never reach true Ataraxy, nirvana, right? But like you'll never reach it. But if you can focus on actually building something that solves a problem that is on the table, and you get that, and there's a very few examples of that actually happening. I don't think I've ever done it. You might have, but the iPod solved the problem. We didn't know we had it, but it solved it. I don't think the iPhone did. The iPhone complicated our lives, but the iPod was a magical piece of hardware and software. Like, you went from carrying around your CDs. I remember in the school bus, in the snow, and you had 1,000 songs in your pocket, and that solved the problem you didn't know you had.
Yep.
music streaming also. But that's like the lack of its philosophy. You don't need to read the Agile Manifesto forever.
Yeah, no, it's so absolutely true. So I know you're working on a lot of projects. You've worked on a bunch of projects. You mentioned the recent transaction. I know you're doing a lot of things. What do you see, Federico, as being kind of the next trend of digital products in fitness? Are you seeing some underlying trends? I know everyone talks about AI and almost to a fault. What are your beliefs in trends?
I bought a washing machine last week and it says AI powered. So allow me to doubt about the next trends. AI is very powerful, but remember when like late pandemic, everyone was talking about blockchain.
Yep.
Thank God OpenAI came along and everyone was blockchain is the future. NFTs. Core will have NFT bikes in the future. But as far as trends, I don't think I'm smart enough to call out the trends, but I do think that there's some implications as to what people expect to interact with their products. I think there's a big need from users to interact with technology in less or in more human ways. So having a conversation with ChatGPT, for example, apparently is I do it sometimes for fun. Like you turn on ChatGPT and you're like, hey, tell me about Sophocles, and it talks to you. And it's like I think a lot of that will get integrated into software that allows you to get healthier. I think on the one hand, it has to be more interactive. On the other hand, it has to be less intrusive.
Yeah.
Do we really need 5 apps for a heart rate? I don't think so. Like you finish a workout and there's like this app that takes it, like you post it on Strava. Does everything need to be a social network? Also, like, do you like we're friends, right? Imagine like we hang out every day and we're friends. Do you really need to know when I work out? Like, does it add anything to you? Maybe like we're in a competitive stage. In that case, maybe we choose to compete. But like, do we really need? So I think I don't know what the solution is, but I think everything is tending towards a more private approach. For example, like your data is yours, and how the data interacts with you is more of a personal experience. Interfaces keep getting simpler to the point that it might just talk to you, and also the ability to have your data interpreted by different services. I think is key. I think the data is yours, like your blood sugar, your heart rate, whatever, it's yours. And how you get that data, I think opens up a lot of businesses, like your hydration, where like Nix is doing the hydration thing, and like, and there's like Garmin has your movement and Apple, like, but that's your data. And then how you choose to interpret it with what service, I think that's the layer that goes on top of it, and we can call it AI. And then how you interact with it, maybe it's another layer. And I think at some point down the road, we'll stop building websites, for example. Like you don't need an app, or like you'll build a service that interacts with your data. But that's just, it sounds a lot like Iron Man, like putting on his helmet and talking to you. But I think that's what people want. I don't think people necessarily want, like, for example, at one point in connected fitness, everyone was trying to build like a remote classroom. Like you were on a bike in your house, but like you could interact with other people. And that, to me, the benefit of doing it at home is I don't want to see.
Right.
It sounds horrible, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to see other people. If I did, I'd go to the gym. Because COVID was a thing, but like it lasted like how many? Like here in Uruguay, nothing was closed. Like gyms closed for like a month, and I know it was bad, but like, it wasn't gonna last forever. I mean, if it lasted forever, we would all be dead. So it was gonna end at some point. But everyone was trying to like duplicate things that didn't really matter, and then everything that was successful or everything that shifted into something else, I think it follows those trends. It simplified interfaces. It gave people more ownership of their data, and I think around that is, that's kind of where it goes. To me, that's where it's going.
Yep. That makes sense. So since you've built a lot of products and you've been part of teams that built a lot of products, what are some of your pearls of wisdom of experience that you would tell an entrepreneur that has an idea of a product, or somebody or a team that started building a product? Maybe they got their toes stubbed, if you understand what I mean. Maybe they had a problem.
Yeah.
What are some of those pearls of wisdom you would tell the listeners to keep in mind when they have an idea or they're trying to execute on an idea?
Don't ever fall in love with the idea.
Oh, that's a good one.
The idea, but don't fall in love with it, because if you fall in love with it, it's like when you're infatuated by it. Like when I was younger, like you meet a girl, like, oh, she's perfect. And soon my daughter's gonna have the same problem. She's gonna meet a guy. The girl, you're gonna say, oh, they're perfect. And if you're infatuated by it, you're instinctively unable to criticize it. And in order to make something better, sometimes you have to criticize. Again, with respect, you have to make it clear nowadays. But like, if you fall in love with the idea, you'll never make it better. You need to kind of beat it up a little, throw it around, like beat it up, build an MVP, have that beat up. And I understand, like, it's an expensive process. It isn't like, oh, well, like, I have never heard of like, if you watch the movie The Social Network, like Zuckerberg was in his dorm room, he built this thing, and like, I have serious, like, I have absolutely no evidence to this, but I'm pretty sure that's not how it happened.
Yes, exactly.
I've never seen someone like, I remember when I was a small kid, my first bike was a Schwinn. I'm pretty sure that between that bike I had and the bikes you're making now, a lot happened. Like, no one fell in love with the idea of that bike. It was a horrible bike. This was in the 80s. Like, the bike actually was my cousin's, the first one. Like, I ain't heard it. And it's just, if you love something too much, you're never able to change it because you love it. And you don't want to change something you love. Like, which isn't a message against love, but you can't be critical with something that you're completely obsessed with or in love with.
Yeah.
You have to be a bit cynical in that regard.
Yes, boy, is that the truth. You know, you're as much of a philosopher as you are a digital product development person. And there's something to be said for that, because it shows the importance of context.
I'm going to send this to my high school teacher. She said I'd never finish high school. Look at me. I'm a philosopher now. But it context is everything. In fact, with AI, context is everything too.
Yes, boy, is that the truth. Because I tell people now, I said the tools aren't the thing. The thing to me is how we think about them.
The context, now that you brought AI, think about this. People say that ChatGPT is dangerous because it makes up things. You know who makes up things? People. People make up things all the time. All the time. I was in a meeting once and we were trying to work out a heart rate variation formula. We were not the people to do that. You probably need doctors to do that. And a guy in the room said, give me until tomorrow, I'll come up with a formula. And he came up with a formula that was, the mathematical definition is a linear equation. And basically meant if your heart rate is here and you do this, then you're here. And it was a straight line. And, you know, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I know heart rate probably doesn't work like that. They probably figured, like, if it did, they would have figured that out 500 years ago.
That's right.
I can come up with a formula. And the problem is, like, if I say I can come up with it, maybe I get away with it now. But if my son comes in, he's 7, and he's like, I can come up with, no one will believe him. But if I go into a meeting and I can come up with a formula, I might, like, if I was ill-intentioned, I might be able to sell you on that. I have that formula, and you're a smart guy. So the problem with people that fall in love with ideas is that you ultimately tend to believe everything that validates your notion of them. Like, this is such a great idea that the formula is so simple. What eventually happened is that they had to get rid of that because it was like false advertising. So context is everything. And if you don't understand it, you can't understand the context without being critical a little bit.
Yep.
Of your own ideas. I'm not saying like be critical of other people. I don't like talking about other people's ideas, but like, if you have a really good idea, beat it up. And if it stands and tests through that beat up, have your friends beat it up. And if it stands to it, you probably have a great idea. Congratulations.
That's That's such wisdom, Federico. That's so wise. I really want to thank you for making time today for our listeners. This was a fantastic conversation. We're going to have your contact and company information in the show notes below. Reach out to this guy, follow him on LinkedIn. I love your thinking. I love some of your posts. Really different stuff, but so relevant today, Federico. Thank you so much for making time and sharing that wisdom.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you for all you've done for the fitness industry. I'm a fan of you. Like you built some cool stuff.
Well, listen, yeah. I'm very honored.
We'll be in touch.
I'm very honored to talk to guys like you and learn more, my brother.
Thank you. All right, we'll be in touch, Bryan.
Take care.
Hello, listeners. This is Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks so much for listening to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. The podcast is made possible by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, a consortium of global brands working together to enhance the adoption of technologies in the fitness space. Our company, Videri Ventures, which is invested in Vertimax, Montezuma, Gold's Gym, Houston, Texas, and Fitness 24/7 Thailand, also underwrites the podcast, along with our service companies, Integris Advisors, Moon Mission Media, and others. Please feel free to share this podcast with your colleagues. And if I can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out, bryanko'rourke@gmail.com, or find me on any of the major social networks. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.